series. And so if you are interested in any one of them, maybe you are interested in building a APIs from scratch, or if you're interested in any DevOps topics and Kubernetes Docker. So yeah, all session recordings are available there. And if you are interested to speak or organize a session, you are most welcome. You can contact any one of the organizer, me and Nilesh or Satish or Senthil. And we also are organizing a global Azure bootcamp. So we have opened for a call for speakers. If you are interested to speak in a global Azure bootcamp Singapore, you are welcome. And yeah, you can register at the CFS link. By CFS link, I will ping in chat box later on. These sessions we have done in past. So if you are interested, you can just go and bit.ly Azure Singapore sessions. It will redirect to our YouTube channel playlist, and you can watch there. So about today's session, I already mentioned it's more on .NET MAUI Blazor, build hybrid mobile apps with the desktop and web apps by Gerald. Gerald is senior software engineer in Microsoft from NL, and he have you can follow him on Twitter or GitHub and blogs. He is having very interesting blogs. So if you are interested in .NET topics or building hybrid and mobile apps, I think yeah, it's very good resources are available there. About to related to today's session, actually today's session is quite unique, but we have done some sessions in past related to .NET. So and actually API building series was on .NET. So if you're interested in any one of the session, you can see there. We have also done some chartbuster session with John Seville, Donovan Brown, and so these all are available in our playlist as our Singapore sessions. Uh, this is our YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And uh, related to there is also one session happening in our community, the data community. So on 20th April. So if you are interested in any of the topic of Power BI, so this session might be interesting for you. And this is our Global Azure Bootcamp Singapore, which is scheduled for May 7th. So if you haven't registered, please do. We have already announced on the meetup.com, and CFS link is open for this. So I will ping the CFS link later on in the chat box. So if you are interested to speak, please do register. And before hand over to Gerald, there are a few reminders. Please keep yourself on mute. And this session is being recorded. If you like the session, please help to spread the words in social media. Thank you. I think Gerald, stage is yours.
All right, thank you so much. That was a lot of information and a lot of good other sessions. So well done. Let's see. I probably should share my screen, but I can't because I'm not an organizer or presenter.
Oh, okay. Sorry, just give me a second.
No worries.
Uh, I think,
Yeah, that works. And let's do this one. Oh, then it shows me that ugly bar. That's so okay. Here we go. So I'm here to talk about .NET MAUI Blazor, as Mohammed already pointed out. So with this, you can now build hybrid mobile, desktop, and web apps. So let's learn all about that. It's pretty exciting stuff. I've already been introduced a little. My name is Gerald. I'm from the Netherlands, working for Microsoft remotely for the US, actually. My Twitter handle was also already on there. If you have any questions like outside of this session, which is totally fine, I prefer to have questions in public if you can, because a lot of people are asking me questions, which I'm very happy with. But it's sometimes too much to answer all by myself, so other people can jump in. I can maybe retweet it, so other people will have the answer. But so that's or if you have something else to say, tweet at me. That's always good to see. Now, if you have something that you can't really share, or you have something else, my email is on there as well. Feel free to send me an email. I can't always respond instantly, but I'm doing my best to respond to everyone. Just like this wonderful user group, I have a YouTube channel as well. So if you like what you see today, there is more on my YouTube channel. So be sure to go check that out and maybe subscribe to that as well. Um, On the agenda for today, I think it's pretty straightforward because there's this new thing, .NET MAUI. So let's talk a little bit about what is .NET MAUI. Then we have Blazor. That's been around for a little bit longer, right? But let's just see a little bit like what is Blazor exactly. So we make sure that everyone has the same kind of like knowledge and we can go from there. And then we have like the main event, like what is .NET MAUI Blazor? We just put those two things together and what can they do then? So let's get started with what is .NET MAUI first. Well, it's the evolution of Xamarin Forms. So maybe you've been working with Xamarin already or Xamarin Forms. Then you already know a little bit about what you're going to see because Xamarin Forms has been our cross-platform app offering based on C# and .NET for primarily iOS, Android, and UWP. But kind of like unofficially, we also had Tizen, Linux, WPF, and macOS support. So that is pretty amazing if you think about it. You could do all these things with macOS, with Xamarin. And I know that there's tons of apps being released for iOS, Android, and UWP. I know of a couple of apps that has been released to the Mac App Store actually with Xamarin. So, you could do that today. But if we kind of like look at the history, Xamarin Forms has been around for like, I don't know, 7, 8 years, almost a decade. Um, and Forms, it also has kind of like his boring name, right? Forms, filling out forms, that's something no one likes doing, right? And that kind of always stuck with our image. So it's kind of like, even if you look at back, this is a picture from like the website, even before Microsoft maybe acquired Xamarin because it was a separate company first. And even if we don't even look at what it says on the right, you can just see that Xamarin Forms is best for, and then you see a couple of screenshots which are really boring, right? They have these entry fields and a button, or that's what it's supposed to look like. So it's really for data entry applications and those kind of stuff. And then you have Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android, which is kind of like the underlying layer for Xamarin Forms. And suddenly, if you do that, you can do media players and games and maps and all that kind of crazy stuff. So, it was always kind of like positioned to be boring as well. And I don't know if this story is true or not. I like to believe that it's true. But, you know, I think Xamarin Forms was maybe intentionally designed to do these boring things, right? To do the data entry applications, to do not that really big things, and it was also architectured that way, right? So and that now 7, 8 years later, people want to do crazy things with it, and you can create beautiful apps with Xamarin Forms, but initially it wasn't really designed to do that. So the way things are now in the architecture has its limits. It has outgrown that, and it was time for something new. And together with that, we are moving inside of the .NET framework, which is really exciting. And now we have .NET MAUI, which stands for Multi-Platform App UI. Now the P, we've made that convenient, a little p, because .NET MAUI just doesn't sound the same. So .NET MAUI it is. And with that, we have changed the little bit the message here as well to cross-platform apps based on C# and .NET. That's not going away, but now for iOS, Android, Windows, and macOS. So before we had UWP, but UWP is not really a thing anymore. It's now called Windows because we're using Windows UI, WinUI. And you can see that macOS kind of like moved up as well to like the main line here because we're now supporting macOS as well. So the desktop apps are something that we're supporting more and more as opposed to iOS and Android that we kind of initially supported the most. And together with this, like 90, if you've been working with Xamarin Forms before, 90% of the APIs, the outside APIs that you as the consumer work with are the same. But under the hood, everything has changed basically. And with this new architecture, we've opened up a world for all kinds of new things, and it has been better for reliability, for performance. So we did all these kinds of things. But for you to work with, it should be pretty much the same. Or if you are coming into .NET MAUI for the first time and looking at it, then it's going to be new for you anyway. So if we look at like how can we capture this in one sentence, .NET MAUI is the most productive way to develop native apps that perform great on any device that runs Android, iOS, macOS, or Windows from a single code base. Now, the single code base is more true than ever. We'll see that in a little bit. So just quickly for I was going to say the more technical people, but you're all technical people, right? So how does .NET MAUI like work under the hood? The app code is kind of like the code that you want to spend your time. That's where you want to be productive, right? That is your $1 billion app idea. That's what's going to be the big hit, and you want to run that on all these devices, right? If you're just going to run it on one device and you know that your app is going to be Android forever, then maybe you should just write it in Java or Kotlin, right? That, I'll be honest, that's just the thing. But if you want to write it on, if you want to run it on multiple platforms down the road, maybe not today, but you have plans, then this might be an option for you. Now, before .NET MAUI, you would have to use all these separate SDKs, right? All the SDKs that Google, that Apple, that Microsoft is putting out for you to work with. You would have to build the same app kind of like 3 times. And that's what we want to avoid, right? Because you just want to spend your time on that app code, your business logic. So how are we going to get from these SDKs to your app code in .NET? We have a couple of layers here. So first off, we have the .NET runtime, which is the layer where your .NET code is going to be run. So that's where your C# code is actually going to go through and be able to do its thing. Now, if you really want to get down to the technical details, for Android, iOS, and macOS, this still runs on Mono, which is the open source implementation of the .NET Framework runtime. Kind of like historically, find it on Wikipedia. It's been going on for a long time. And for Windows, it runs on the core CLR. But that's not, you don't notice anything from that. That will be figured out like under the hood as well. Because unique in .NET 6 now is that we have a unified base class library where all the code will go through first. And that will sort out like, hey, do I need to run this on Mono? Do I need to run this on core CLR, depending on the platform that you're on? Then on top of that, we have all the bindings. So what has been done already in the Xamarin era is we have bindings that allow you to write C# code against the native library things, the native SDKs. So we basically just made a C# version of all the APIs for Android, iOS, Mac Catalyst, and of course for Windows it was already C#, so that was easy. But you can use that. And on top, we built this abstraction layer that we now call .NET MAUI, which allows you to do all these graphical things, right? It has all the controls, everything you need to build rich and great looking UIs. And with that, the only thing that you kind of need to do to create wonderful apps for all these platforms is write your app code, know how to work with .NET MAUI, and then you can deploy to Android, iOS, macOS, and Windows, and maybe more platforms in the future, who knows? So what is already in .NET MAUI? Well, because it is the evolution of Xamarin Forms, we already had a lot of stuff that we could, relatively easily port over to .NET MAUI. So we already have 40 plus controls. We have everything you need for navigation, flyout menus, bottom tabs, top tabs, all the navigations, adaptive layouts, because we're running on mobile devices, but also on desktop devices. So your layouts need to be adaptive, right? They need to adapt to whatever resolution they suddenly run on. So we have that. We have support for right to left. So if you are in countries where Arabic is a big thing, then you can do all the things right to left, and that will all work now as well. Something in Xamarin Forms that wasn't, now we have focus on that. Same thing for accessibility. We have accessibility things built in, something that is easily overlooked, but very, very important for the people who need it. And if we implement the accessibility right, that will help you to write more accessible apps, and everyone will be happy. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier the single code base. And again, if you've been working with Xamarin Forms, then you probably know this kind of like solution structure. You have 3 projects right here. So you have the My App at the top, which is your shared code. That's where you want to have all your code. That's the app code that I first mentioned. Then you have My App.Android, My App.iOS, maybe My App.UWP, .Linux, .Tizen. You can name all the platforms. You would need a project for each platform that you wanted to run on. It's kind of like the bootstrap for your application on that platform. Now, what we wanted to do is with .NET MAUI is put that into a single project. Why do we want to do that? Not because it's just some fancy new thing that we wanted to do and we could see if we could do it technically, but that will also help you with images, fonts, platform code, and splash screens, for instance. And there's much more. Because One thing that is a major pain in the neck, if you want to add an image, then you have to do it on Android, and you will have to specify all kinds of different dimensions for Android. Then you have to do the same thing for iOS, but the dimensions are a little bit different, and for all the other platforms as well. So what we've done now, we've put this into a single project, and what you can do is now put these fonts and these images only in one place, because we only still have one place. We have that single project, and we will figure out for you how to resize that image, how to put it all in the right places for Android, iOS, all the platforms, and you don't have to worry about that. So that is one of the great things that we achieve with the single project. Now I skipped this little screenshot here just now, because if you still want to run some platform code, whoops, that's totally possible, because we have this platforms folder with Android, iOS, and Windows underneath it. So, if you still need to write platform-specific code, then that's something that you can totally do. Just put it in one of these folders, and suddenly, boom, you're transported to Android land, and you can write all the Android code, still in C# and .NET, but you can write all the Android code that you want and surface that to the abstraction layer that is .NET MAUI, and that will allow you to reshare even more code. So you can still totally do that. Then how are you going to run all these things? Like normally in C# or .NET, you're going to say like, hey, I'm going to click this project. I'm going to say set a startup project, and then I'm going to run this thing. Well, this is now you can just select whatever device you want to run on. So the iPhone, the Pixel for Android or a Windows machine, and it will automatically figure out where to get all the bits and pieces, put that together for that platform, and run it on whatever you select. Now, what is there beyond .NET MAUI? We also had a thing called Essentials, Xamarin. So Xamarin Essentials, the Essentials name is kind of gone right now. Before, everything would be in Microsoft.maui.essentials, and then all the APIs that you would see here. But we've broken that up into more logical namespaces so that it's easier to discover them. But you can still use all these APIs, because all the devices by now have have a GPS sensor, right? Have something to say about connectivity. Are you connected to the internet? Yes or no? Have battery information. But you would still need to write platform-specific code. With Essentials, we have one unified API to do all these things. So you can still find those in .NET MAUI, and you can do all of that besides all the UI stuff that I've been talking about. Now, another thing that I'm going to talk about way more is Blazor Hybrid, of course. So we're going to see that. I'm going to skip over this slide for now. So let's do a quick demo of .NET MAUI. And what I want to show you the most basically is actually creating a new project and see what that looks like in the single project world. So here I have Visual Studio 2022, the preview right now, because .NET MAUI is still in preview. We're going to be generally available, so we're going to release the stable version next month at build. So keep on the lookout for that. But you can use it in Visual Studio 2022 preview today. And if we're going to create a new project, we can search here for MAUI. You can already see it here on the left as well. And we have a couple of project templates that you can use. We have the .NET MAUI app here. We also have the .NET MAUI Blazor app, so that's the one that I'm going to show you a little bit later on. And we have like a MAUI, class library, right? So a DLL that you can use to share code. Let's go with the .NET MAUI app for now. You just have to specify a project name, a location, a solution name, click create, and then it's going to think a little bit. And suddenly, boom, you have a project that you can run on Android, iOS, macOS, and Windows. Actually, while I'm talking about macOS, that might be a good thing to mention. If you want to develop for iOS and macOS, you're still going to need a Mac. You can do a Mac. You can have it on your network. You don't even have to see it if that's what you don't want. You can connect to it through Visual Studio, but you will need a Mac if you want to develop for iOS and Android, just because all the tools only run on a Mac, and Apple doesn't allow us to run it anywhere else, basically. So you're going to need a Mac for that. Now, if we have this little file new project, then you can see we have we get this XAML, right? So you could do this in C# if that's what you want, but XAML is like the better experience right now. We're working on a variant where you can also do it in C# code, a little bit nicer C# code, a bit more fluent syntax if you want, more like Swift UI and Jetpack Compose. But that's something that we're still developing. But that's definitely something that .NET MAUI architecture enables us to do. That has opened the door for other things than MVVM to come in as well and plug into our wonderful architecture. Now here's a little sample thing. So a couple of labels, a button, an image. So you will have all these things to play with. But what I really actually wanted to show you is here in the Solution Explorer where we have this single project, right? So you can already see here at the top, it has selected my Pixel emulator, but I can also choose a Windows machine, or I can choose iOS local devices or iOS simulators. See, so the menu, excuse me, the menus are here. I just need to connect to my Mac and I can run it on iOS as well. And here we have the platform. So not only can you write the platform specific code here, but at the end of the day, we still have to provide Android with an AAB file and iOS with an IPA file, because they're not suddenly going to say, hey, yeah, just send me an exe and we'll make sure that it runs, right? That's not something that you're going to do. At the end of the day, we still need to provide a native app binary that they can use, including the metadata that is needed for that. So we have the Android manifest with some metadata about our Android app, same for iOS, same for Mac Catalyst, same for Windows. But if we look here, then suddenly you can see Android namespaces, right? So you can write all the Android platform specific code here. But if we look at like the resources, we can see these SVGs. So SVG is kind of like the preferred way to do things now, because if you put an SVG in here, then it can resize to infinity, right? So it can scale up and down, and we can generate all the images that we kind of need for making them available in your app. So that's kind of like what I wanted to show you. Now, if we want to do this on a Windows machine, I can just click Windows machine. It's going to build a little bit, and it will come up as a Windows app. I'm not sure how long this is going to take right now. So, oh, deploy started. So this seems pretty quick. And we can see what this XAML actually looks like. And then there's a couple of extra things that I want to show you. Yes, I hear a microphone opening up. Is there a question? No, someone who needs to mute. All right, I'm just going to keep talking. So this is the sample app that you get out of the box, and it's just a simple button, and you can start working from here. This is just to get you started with all the things here. Now, what is also really cool is, for Windows, it's pretty straightforward, but maybe for emulators and simulators, it can be a hassle to switch around with all the things. So we have this little XAML live preview here that you can use. You can't interact with it yet. Maybe that's something that will come, who knows? But at least, if we are going to change, like, I'm trying to find if I can zoom in here. Oh, here we go. So we can zoom here a little bit. And we have all these cool things. We have hard reload now, so you can change all these things while you're in your debug session. So I can say background color, I can say red, and whenever I save that, you can see that the button automatically goes to red. And now I don't have to switch around between these windows all the time. You can just see the preview right here. So that's something very nice as well. And I think you can also hear, it's not popping up for some reason right now, but you can see like the live property inspector and do all these kinds of things. So this is a very nice productivity tool as well. All right, so then next on the list, what is Blazor? Well, basically web development without JavaScript. If you think about like single page application frameworks, you have these rich applications, right, with on the web in your browser, also with menus, with grids, with dialogues that you can show. And then whenever you go to that exact same application on your mobile device, then it scales and you will suddenly get the hamburger menu, so that it works nice on your mobile device. But if you think about these frameworks, then you automatically think about Angular and React and Vue, and those are all JavaScript, right? Which is, you can love JavaScript, you can hate JavaScript, but the fact is that we can't really go around it anymore. But what you probably want to do, maybe if this was a language that people do love, A lot of people love JavaScript, don't get me wrong, but if you, it's always a hassle. It's always not productive to have to switch between languages, right? So that's where Blazor basically came around, where you could just keep working in the C# language. You could use all the tooling and the IDE, Visual Studio, or maybe Visual Studio Code if that's what you want. You could just keep using that, and it's a consistent ecosystem because you don't have to suddenly start working with npm packages or all that kind of stuff. You can just keep using NuGet packages, and stability. It has been built upon technology that has been a proven technology for the last 10 years, 20 years. I don't even know how long ASP.NET has been going on. And .NET, I think .NET actually celebrated its 20th or 25th anniversary, one of those. So, it has been around for a long, long time. And you can write, so basically you can now use this single page application framework because that is what it is without ever having to leave C sharp. But, you can still use JavaScript if that's what you want, right? So there's still like interoperability there. If you have that JavaScript framework library that you still need, then you can totally connect to that and do all the things. We'll see that in a little bit as well. But if you don't want to write JavaScript and just want to keep writing C sharp, that's totally something that you can do. So where does this all fit in? Because we have a lot of things now. It's built on top of ASP.NET. I already mentioned that, and there we already have in the web UI corner we have MVC, we have the Razor pages. We already have like single page applications that you could use with all of that, and there we can also place Blazor, right? And then on the other side we have basically all the services that don't really have a UI. So we have HTTP APIs, so all the web APIs and that kind of stuff. Signal R, which also plays a big role in Blazor. We have workers, gRPC, so all the cool stuff to kind of like connect the backend services together, right? So we now have a very, very complete set of web development tools here as well. Now let's look at how it works. Until now, until .NET MAUI, we kind of like had two flavors for Blazor. We had Blazor Server, which is kind of like your more traditional approach. So everything basically runs on the server on a ASP.NET Core host. You will have Blazor. You can have Razor components, which is very important. I'll show you that in a little bit why. And then with a Signal R connection, whenever the client connects with their browser, with their document object model, then whenever a user clicks something, it would connect to the server, let them know where it has been clicked, and then the server would render like the new changes in the UI and send only that piece back, so only the difference back to the browser, right? So that's like kind of like your more traditional approach, where it's still all rendered on the server, but it's kind of like heavy on the connection, although it's Signal R, but you would still need a connection. We'll get to the pros and cons in a minute here. But you also have Blazor WebAssembly. Now you can kind of like see the same box for Blazor with the Razor components. There they are again, .NET and WebAssembly and the document object model. But now it never leaves the browser, right? It can all just run in the browser and it will be very fast, and it doesn't really need that connection to the server anymore. Now WebAssembly isn't something that Microsoft has invented, that we have invented. It's a kind of like also a runtime, so you can just compile your thing to WebAssembly. And the only thing that we did, and I say we, I had nothing to do with it, but smarter people than me have made .NET compilable to WebAssembly, and you can use other languages. You can use C++, you can use Rust, probably some other things. If you can write a compiler that compiles it to WebAssembly stuff, then you can make any language run there. And it's now built into browsers. So that enables us to run C# inside of the browser, basically. So that is really cool. What it does mean, though, is that it's also going to download the whole .NET framework into the browser, right? Because now with .NET Core, we have a version with .NET that we deliver with our application. So we need to download that each time. But with .NET 6, the .NET runtime DLL is only just 1 megabyte. Depending on what your use case is. Here in the Netherlands, the data plans for your mobile device are pretty good. 1 megabyte doesn't really count that much. It doesn't cost you anything, basically. But other parts in the world, I don't know how it is in your part of the world. It can be more costly, so that are things to consider. But this is one way to actually run full client applications just as you would in JavaScript, basically. Now, whenever you have different variations, you also have choices to make. So I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I think the important bits are in kind of like the cons at the bottom. So for Blazor server, it requires a persistent connection, right? You will have to go back and forth to the server, so you don't really have offline applications with that. And you have a little bit higher UI latency because each change has to go to the server and back. So the latency will be a little bit more than just running it inside of your browser. For Blazor WebAssembly, I already mentioned like a larger download size initially, but and a little bit slower runtime performance, maybe depending on the machine that you're running on, because the machine suddenly has to do all the things, and if you're running on a not so powerful client, then it can be a little bit slower. But with Blazor WebAssembly, you can create truly offline applications or PWAs if that's what you want. I think there's also an option to create a PWA from it. That means, of course, for your Blazor application, it can be offline because as soon as you want to go out and get data from a REST API or something, then sure, you're going to need that internet connection still, right? But at least you don't need it for like the core application. So that's kind of like the difference there. So we then have Blazor server, Blazor WebAssembly, but now the thing that I'm going to talk about right after this demo of a regular Blazor app, we also have Blazor Hybrid. So that's going to be pretty exciting. But let me first pop into a little demo for like regular Blazor. So let's see what that is all about. Um, so this is my .NET MAUI application that I just had. I can also do new project. Like I said, Blazor has been around for a little bit longer, so you don't need Visual Studio Preview for that. You can just get it in your stable version right now. And here you can see we already have template for Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly. You can fairly easy switch between them if you've chosen the wrong one. If you later on decide like, hey, this is not the right format for me, I want to switch to the other one, that's totally fine. You can totally do that. It's not that hard. But for now, let's choose the server one, and we can do next. We again have to specify a name, and the interesting thing here is that we can also say like, hey, which framework we want to use, right? Because now we can just choose the framework that we want to build on. You can get authentication right in the template, configure for HTTPS. I don't even know why this is an option. We should use HTTPS, right? And you can run things on Docker if that's what you want. So let's do create, and then it's going to create this project. But now we have this Blazor application. It's going to show us a couple of options to also connect it to the cloud. So you're helped here. It should be pretty easy to get started. But if we look at this template, it's kind of interesting what we see here, right? So we have Razor, but if we look at the www read, we also have CSS because we still need the web elements, right? We still need to render HTML. We still need to do these things. But we also have a program CS. So this is kind of like our our entry point into the application. And you can see here that this is built on top of ASP.NET, which I already mentioned, because we have this application builder, which is actually something that I should have mentioned for .NET MAUI maybe as well, but we'll see that in the other demo that I have after this. So we have this application builder, the generic host builder that you might know from your other ASP.NET Core projects. We're going to enable the Razor pages. We're going to enable server-side Blazor. So this is not something that you should not do whenever you do the WebAssembly. And we're going to register the singleton for our dependency injection stuff for the weather forecast service, right? And then some other things to kind of like configure our application as well. So we have all that. And then if we look at like our app.razor, this is something that is very specific to Blazor, right? Here we're going to wire up like how it's going to find the pages that we have in our application. And you can configure much more in the router, but at the very core, we're going to say, hey, you're going to need this assembly. So the assembly where the app object is, and that's where you're going to scan for the routes. And if we look at like the pages right here, then you can see that those routes are registered like this, add page /. So whenever you go to /, whenever you go to home, you will land on this index.razor. Whenever we want to go to fetch data, we do add page fetch data. And that's what this router does. It scans the assembly for the app. So it scans the whole assembly for these add page things, picks that up, and that will be all the routes that are available in your application. Now, whenever a route is found, so that's kind of like this thing, we are going to do this. and whenever it's a not found, so basically your 404 scenario, HTTP 404, the page is not found, it's going to do this. And you can completely customize this if you know what all the things are. But for now, that's kind of like the basic overview of how this all works. And if it's found, then it's going to go to the main layout and it's going to do a couple of things there. So I'm not going to go over all the things here, but that's kind of like the important bit on how to bootstrap things. And if we run this, then we will see a web application that is run inside of our browser. Of course, there is a little web hosting element here. So a web host, Kestrel is spun up in the background as well to host all these things. And you can see that we have a single page application here. So we can go to the counter, we can do click me, this all works. We can do fetch data, and this kind of simulates getting some JSON data from a third-party service. And what's really cool, if we look at how this all works, so maybe the click me component, if we go to the pages and to the counter, you can see that we have C# code. There's no JavaScript here anywhere. So we have all of this. Now you can see a couple of mixed things here. I already explained the route. This page title, you can also see the syntax is a little bit different, or the highlighting is a little bit different than the regular HTML tags. And also this is not an HTML tag. So this is kind of like a Razor tag helper, I think it's meant, it's named. And this basically, this particular one sets the page title, right? So if we look at our browser here again, we can see kind of like here it sets the counter at the top of the tab, right? It's maybe a bit small for you watching this, but it says it here, the window title, it sets it to counter. That's kind of like what this thing does. So that's a little helper for you that allows you to do that kinds of things, because typically you would say that set that on the HTML page, right? So we need a way to kind of set that. Now here you can see plain or regular HTML, you can just mix that in, but here you can see suddenly again that @ sign with current count. And whenever you see an @ sign, you know that kind of like refers back to C# and .NET. So in this case, we're referring to this variable right here, which is the current count, which is 0. And then in this button, which is again regular HTML, and then suddenly, boom, we have this element, which is the onClick. And with the onClick, we wire up a event. So we have this increment count here. It just calls this method right here, and that does current count plus plus. And then automatically, whenever you do that, it picks up that it changed in the UI. We don't need to do anything fancy here. If you do need to manually trigger the UI, that can be done as well. But you can see that this just works, right? We don't need to do anything fancy. It just picks up changes in that variable and it will show that automatically. So that is pretty cool. Now with the fetch data, it even becomes more interesting. We have this route, we have the page title, you can do usings in here, and this inject, so that's kind of like that dependency injection thing. We can just inject this service in here, we get that forecast service, and then you can see down here at the bottom in this code block, we're going to get this, so this is a lifetime event, lifecycle event from the page. We're going to get the forecast from this service. And it's going to load that in this collection right here. And if we scroll back up, you can see as long as the forecasts are null, then it's going to say loading. And then again, it's going to automatically pick up that this gets populated. And then it will switch to this else. It will reevaluate the whole thing. It will go to this else, create a table, and kind of like in your PHP kind of way. I started with PHP, where you can really mix all these things here. You can do this for each and just print out your HTML that you want to have here, right? So that is pretty amazing. One thing that's still interesting to mention is the Razor components that I mentioned earlier. So you can wrap everything in a component. And if we look at like the index here, you can see that this is another one of those Razor tag helpers. I don't know, maybe that's the wrong name, but I'm just going to call it that. So we have this survey prompt, which is again not a regular HTML thing, right? And if we look here in our shared folder, we have a survey prompt. So it's kind of like linked based on the file name, what the name of that tag is going to be. So that's something to remember. And here you can see it's again HTML with a little bit of code here. But this is basically a Razor component. You can take this Razor file, you can put it in a separate DLL, you can put it in a NuGet, you can ship it to other people, and they can use it as a component in their application. And that makes it really powerful. I'm going to get back to that. But these components, I think, is something that's really going to open up the power between .NET MAUI Blazor, regular Blazor, and all the Blazors here. What's left for interesting things to mention here is this parameter thing. So if you go back to the index, you can see that we set this title as an attribute. How is Blazor working for you? And you can enable that by creating a property on your component and then add the parameter attribute to it so that it knows that you can set the title from the outside basically, and then you can use this title here in your component. So if we look at what that looks like in the UI and go to home, you can see how is Blazor working for you, right? So if I would change that to something completely else, then that would change in the browser as well, and you can use it like that. So that is pretty cool. Also, one last note, if you don't like these code blocks, I can totally imagine that. I don't like them either. So what you can do is just, get this thing out of here, copy that, or actually cut it out of here, cut the code block, save it. And then what you can do in your Solution Explorer shared, I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to name that survey prompt dot razor.cs. So make sure that name is the same and then add .cs, and it will actually add it as a code behind file. And you will have to make this partial so that it's a partial class, and now you can just put the code in here and it will start working again. It will understand that these things belong together, and you can divide your code up a little bit nicer like this. At least that's how I like to structure my code, and you can see that it's happy now. So this works automatically out of the box as well. Just different ways of doing things to achieve the same result basically. So there we have that. That's done as well. Now we know what Blazor is. So let's get to the main event. I don't know if I had 45 minutes or an hour, but I'm just going to talk for an hour. So you're going to have to deal with it. So .NET MAUI plus Blazor, that's the best of both worlds. Here we have a little .NET bot holding all the kind of devices and all the things because we can do all the things here. With .NET MAUI Blazor, you can build cross-platform native apps that run on Windows, iOS, macOS, and Android. Those are the same platforms that I mentioned for .NET MAUI. That's not a coincidence. You can use your existing Razor class library. So that's why I kept mentioning the Razor components, which live in Razor class libraries. You can just reuse them for your .NET MAUI Blazor application, which is really cool. So if you have an existing Blazor application with components, you don't need to do anything. You can just use those, make a reference, or install that NuGet on your .NET MAUI Blazor application, and boom, it will just work. And one really important thing is you will have full platform device access. So I'm going to show you that in the demo, but you can access anything on the platform, anything that is native, anything that is available on the platform, on iOS, the camera, the GPS, you name it, you can access that through your .NET MAUI Blazor application as well. So what exactly is .NET Blazor, .NET MAUI Blazor Hybrid? Blazor Hybrid? Well, all the terms. Blazor Hybrid is an extension of Blazor. So basically, it's the third option to go with Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly that I mentioned earlier. It's built on top of .NET 6 and .NET MAUI, and it's implemented through a Blazor Web View control. And basically, the only thing that is the web about this is the UI, because if we don't spin up that server process that I just mentioned inside of your application. We're not going to interpret any JavaScript. We don't need that. It's already running on .NET 6. We don't need the WebAssembly because we already have the full .NET framework to our disposal, right? So we can skip all of that. It runs, it's still called Blazor, but it still runs natively on your app, basically like you would run any .NET app here. So, the performance should be top-notch, should be the same as all the other things. And the really interesting thing is because it's implemented through a Blazor web view, you can basically go two routes again. You can make your full application that web view and do everything in Blazor, or you can just say, I have this complete native application already, and I'm just going to put this little block of Blazor Web View in here as one element, and I'm going to use that. So you can also use it for one element inside of your application. And to make it even more cooler is that I'm talking about .NET MAUI Blazor here, but this also is, the Blazor Web View is also implemented for WinForms, because you can use WinForms again for .NET 6, and it's also implemented for WPF. So if you have more legacy applications, because let's be honest, we watch these sessions from the cool hip people from Microsoft telling us about the latest and greatest stuff, and then you have to go back the next day to work on that legacy Visual Basic application, right? So if we want to also get those legacy scenarios for WinForms and WPF, it's always a big hassle to modernize those. Now with the Blazor Web View, you will have an opening to start replacing only bits and pieces inside of your WinForms application with a Blazor Web View and enable them for more modernization and kind of like rewrite your app that way. Now, how does that work? This can also done in code, but in XAML, it's just the way I like to work. It's going to be the default for the templates. So we have this Blazor web view. It refers to a little host page, like, hey, this is the bootstrapper page that we want to do all the things on. We have a root component, we have a little selector, and we have a component type, which kind of points to the object of that bridges us to kind of like the Blazor world. So that's our main.razor. And again, here we see that router that I explained earlier. It looks a little bit different, but it does exactly the same thing. I'll show you this in a demo in a little bit. So let's do a little bit Blazor Hybrid Mythbusters here. Maybe I already spoiled some of them. It runs 100% natively in one process. So no web server process, nothing like that. It just runs in one process, like one app. And the only thing, like I mentioned already, is kind of like rendered as a web is the HTML. So it will look and feel the same exactly on each platform as maybe on your web site, on your web app as well. And maybe the more important one is no HTTP request, no network required, and no browser sandbox. So no HTTP requests, again, if you are going to go out to servers to get data, which you totally can, then of course there's going to be HTTP requests. But for the application itself, there's no HTTP requests, no network required. You can build a offline app with this, no problem. But the no browser sandbox, that's kind of like a very interesting one, because if you're going to run Blazor inside of your browser, then you're going to have the sandbox. Luckily, right? You don't want to click on the wrong website and boom, suddenly your disk is formatted. That's not something that you want. But with .NET MAUI Blazor, you can do that. You can format your drive if that's what you want. But again, I'm going to show you that all in a little demo. So let's just quickly hop over to that. And let me get, did I close the other one? No, it's this one. Okay. So I have a little demo here, which is very interesting. I have two young children, and they are starting to get into Lego. So, you have all these websites. There was a whole world that opened up to me with all kinds of people who put into websites all the Lego sets that are there, how many blocks are there, how much do they weigh, how big are they? Well, it's crazy. I didn't know all that was there. So we're also going to remodel our house a little bit. So, we need to move a lot of that Lego, and I wanted some way to kind of like figure out how many boxes we need to ship all that Lego, right? So we have a couple of different things here. So let me actually start with like the regular Blazor application. So this is a Blazor server one. And this is, it's going to be very much the same as the template that we already saw. But now it does some things with Lego. So my browser is going to come back up here. You will see kind of like the same template with a big fancy logo on there. And we just have this one page, but this is kind of like the thing that I mentioned, right? We have this browser sandbox. So if we want to do something with files, and we're going to do that, then you're going to have this file upload button, right? Because we're going to have to ask the user to upload a file, and only then we can access the file, which is a good thing, but it just works differently across the different platforms. So let me choose a file. I'm going to go into my solution here. I have CSVs for Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. So let's choose the Lord of the Rings ones. It's going to list all the sets. It has the volume. It has how many pieces. Then I can click analyze. It does some heavy computations like, ooh, what is this? Okay, 7,000 pieces, almost 8,000, and I need 2 boxes to move it all. So that is amazing. Thanks for telling me this. This is an amazing application. Now for the CSVs, this is great, but if you have a maybe a .NET MAUI client app, then we can do things different, right? So let's switch to the MAUI client. Let's run that, and let's see how fast this is going to go, because the Android emulator isn't always the fastest. Oh, this seems pretty good. So this is the Android emulator that you can see right here. This is a .NET MAUI Blazor application that is going to run here, and you will see that it has an identical look. And because we're using these web templates, these web frameworks like Bootstrap, it's going to be responsive automatically. So it's going to hide that menu. It's going to actually I can't really go back to this thing, I guess. Localhost. Localhost? No. So because Bootstrap is in there. So if I resize the screen, it will just pop in that menu, and we get the little hamburger menu, and it works that way. So we get all of that stuff for free. That is really amazing, because that can be a lot of work if you need to implement that yourself. This takes a little while. Maybe I can see if I can spin it up myself. Oh, this is a different application actually. Oh, it's already okay. Okay, I got you. I'm inside of the application already, I think. Okay, so I might be interrupted here because of the debugging session that's coming up, but this is the application. You can see the fancy logos here again, but now suddenly our menu is here, right? And although this looks like a file upload picker HTML thing, it really isn't, because on our mobile device, we can suddenly use a file picker, right? We still can't really access the file system as we would on Windows or Mac OS. It's just not really the same concept on this platform. But what we can do is open a file picker and pick a file through that. So if we do that, you can see this is actually, it's not really that impressive, but it reaches out into the platform capabilities here, and it will show us this native file picker that is installed on your device. And now I can select this Harry Potter thing here, and it will open it up for us, do the exact same thing, do analyze, do all the crunching of the numbers, and now I have 10,000 pieces, and I still need 2 boxes to move this. So this is the exact same application. Actually, I'm going to go into code in a little bit. Well, actually, let me do that right now, because what is interesting here is this brick summary. That's kind of like our shared project. So this is a Razor component. You can share that between the two projects, and actually we did. So if we start with this site server again, you can see that this is the kind of like the template that I showed you earlier, right? But we added a little couple of things here. So we have this pages, we have this index, and here you can see that index file that we had. And you can see that upload brick collections with the input file, and that is what we're going to use whenever we are running this on like the web, right? This is a web project, so this can just have that input file, and it's going to do the thing. But you can see on change, you can do load files. So if we go there, we don't need to do any JavaScript or whatnot. We can just do that all as we would get a file basically on your ASP.NET project. We can process that, get the multiple files, do all the things, process it here, and it will just read that CSV. And you can see here that collection summary. So that's kind of like our shared project thing. That shows me all the things, and we can reuse that between the different projects. Now, if we switch over to the .NET MAUI one, you can basically see that this template is kind of funny. Like we've seen the .NET MAUI template earlier with the platforms here and the resources here, but we've seen also the Blazor template with the www read here and the Razor files, and now we have both. So what they basically did is say, hey, we have the Blazor templates, we have the .NET MAUI templates, we're going to smash them together, and boom, now we have .NET MAUI hybrid. So that's cool. Now, this main page, like I said, this app takes the approach where the full page, the full application is going to be loaded inside of this Blazor web view. You can turn it around if that's what you want as well. And this then brings us to kind of like Blazor land, going through the main.razor, which has that router that I mentioned here. And then it's going to take us here to the pages and to that index. And you can see this is the same Razor syntax, but now we have a couple of different things, right? We have the show file picker. Then it's going to show us that button. And we have this app state for a little bit of state here. And here again, we have that collection summary. So we can reuse that component. Nothing has changed. It will just work between the web and our application right here. But here in our code, some different things are happening, like show file picker. We only need that on Android, iOS, and Mac Catalyst. And for other platforms, we're going to do something else. We can use the file system watcher, because we can just reach out to the C drive. We don't have that sandbox, and we can just use that. So if I stop the application right here, and now the exact same .NET MAUI application, I hope this will get unstuck. I think something is going wrong here with my Visual Studio. But I could run this on Windows. Maybe I still have it. Maybe it's still installed, and I can just show you like this. Oh, no, this is an Android one as well. Wait, Rick. Uh, maybe let's do this one. No. Oh my gosh. This one. They all look the same and work the same. Oh, I think this is, yes, this is the Windows one. So this doesn't have a button because we have that. Oh, now it's getting unstuck because we have this show file picker, right? And Windows is not on here. And this is the exact same application. I could just switch to my run menu, say run this thing on Windows now, no code changes required, and it will run on Windows. And you can again see this has much more space, right? So now we have this adaptive thing. But if I want to run this on a smaller Windows, it does this responsive thing that is built in with Bootstrap, right? So this is really powerful. But you don't see any button because we can now just reach into our file system. So if I get both of these CSV files and I copy them and I go to my downloads folder and I paste them in here, you can see that it picks it up automatically because it just watches my downloads folder, see if there's any CSV files that it understands, and it will load it that way. So you can get out of that sandbox, out of the browser sandbox, and you can make this work in a way that kind of like makes sense for Windows, right? We don't need to push a button and do all those kinds of things if we can just monitor that location on the C drive. So you can do anything right here. That is really amazing. And this really opens up a lot of scenarios, right? So I think that is really, really cool. Now, one last thing that I wanted to demo, maybe you already saw it here in the Solution Explorer, I already also added a WinForms client. So this is really a WinForms thing. If we go to the Form CS, this is a boring gray box of WinForms, right? It still does its thing. It's really cool. It works super fast. And I didn't really hook this up to the rest of the functionality, but what I really just wanted to show you is switch to the WinForms one, click this, it starts running. You can see it's super fast. um, but this is might be your legacy application, right? And it still runs on WinForms, so that's cool. But here in the analysis tab, I just binged with Google to find some free Blazor components because there's third-party components out there as well. I'm not a designer, I can't create a clock like this, but Radzen can. Radzen is a vendor of these components. I got these components. They're in no way optimized to work with .NET MAUI Blazor, .NET MAUI Hybrid. With WinForms is just a regular Blazor component, and I just plugged it in here, loaded it in this Blazor web view here inside of a WinForms thing, and you can see it just runs, right? So this is just some demos, some sample code, some dummy things. Doesn't really show you anything, but just to show you that this way you can replace elements inside of your legacy application and yeah, start modernizing your WinForms app that way. So there is some pretty powerful and amazing stuff available to you with all of this. So there is another really cool demo which not only shows you a .NET MAUI, like a .NET MAUI native app, so a .NET MAUI with all the XAML and translating all the things to native elements. It also has a project which does it in .NET MAUI Blazor. So there's basically two mobile projects in this demo. One does it with .NET MAUI Blazor, one does it with regular .NET MAUI. It also has a Blazor website. And it has all the server components that you can deploy to your own Azure account as well. So this is a full mirror of a real world application with a lot of things built in that you can take a look at. This is a showcase that we've built for .NET Conf for the past November. .NET Podcasts, I will be sure to tweet out the links or do anything like that. But if you go search for .NET Podcasts, you should be able to find this. And this is a pretty cool demo that you can look at yourself and learn about all the things that I've just shown you in depth. It has a really cool things as well. And I know you're like awesome behind your computer. Well, it's 7, 8 o'clock for you at a Friday night, so maybe you're not so energetic and be like awesome. Maybe you're more like awesome. But you want to get started, but hold off. There's a couple of more things that I really want to quickly tell you before I let you explore all of this on your own. So I get a lot of questions then, like when or should I use .NET MAUI Blazor at all, or when should I use .NET MAUI? Like there's all these scenarios right now. Which is the best one to use, or when or should I just use regular Blazor? And there is one simple answer to basically all of this, and that is yes. You should use them all. It's kind of like dependent on what you want to do, right? It's dependent on the requirements for your projects. It's dependent on what you like to work with. It's dependent on maybe you're a web developer looking into getting into a cross-platform app and having an actual app in the store. Then this might open the path for you. But also the other way around. If you want to build cross-platform apps and you suddenly want to go into web development, or you have an existing Blazor web application and you want to reuse those components inside of a cross-platform app, that's all things that you can take into account. So just use whatever is useful to you, whatever makes sense, whatever you want to work with. So definitely, make the right choices based on whatever works for you. That's kind of like my message here. Now, all the resources. So take a quick screenshot or whatever. These are kind of like the links of all the things that I've been showing you here today, and a couple of extra ones as well. But again, just make sure to send me a tweet or an email or whatever, and I'll point you in the right direction if you can't find anything that I've been showing you here today. That's all I have for you today. So thank you so much for joining. There's my Twitter, my email. I hope you learned something here, and enjoy the rest of your evening, and have a good weekend, basically. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gerald, for a wonderful session. I think yeah, it was a lot of things to learn for us, everyone. And we have a few questions here.
Sure.
There are can we develop in VS Code, or is it only available in the Visual Studio to develop VS?
So that's a good question. So I think for a lot of these things, and at least for .NET MAUI, like the best experience is going to be Visual Studio, because it's now inside of .NET directly. You can use VS Code, but I think Microsoft already also announced that we're not investing at this time to make VS Code a great experience. So you can run it, but it will probably involve a lot of command line arguments, command line commands to get it all running. You can, but you're going to have the best experience in full Visual Studio. And we have Visual Studio for Mac, of course, also. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. There is one more question from Thomas. What framework do you use for static sites?
Oh, what framework? So kind of like Blazor is your single page application framework then? So I'm not sure what the question is. You can definitely run, it's an interesting question. Thank you, Thomas. You can definitely run your, I think you're gonna need a Blazor WebAssembly page, and you can run that as a static website. You have a special hosting on Azure as well. I think it costs near to nothing, and you can really run that as a static web app as your thing as well. I hope that kind of answers your question. I'm not really sure what you wanted to know with this. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Thomas and Paul both are quite excited about Blazor. So maybe you can unmute and can ask the questions directly. Paul, good to see you too again.
I'm unmuted, but is my voice clear?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
clear.
Okay,
absolutely.
cool. Yeah, I'm very excited about Blazor. Thanks for sharing with us, Gerald. I'd like to inquire on the what you call this, the Blazor hybrid. Is it intended for desktop only, or can we some setting we can set to like deploy it as a Blazor WebAssembly also, or will that be a separate development?
Oh, so yeah, maybe I should have been more clear on that. Because that's why I kind of like, that's a good one. I totally forgot to mention that. Yeah, so that's why I mentioned like the Razor component so much, right? I personally, this is my personal choice. This is definitely not the truth. Um, for the Blazor hybrid, it's not a setting that you can flip to also run it on a website, right? I guess if you really wanted to, you can make that one Blazor application and run it on both through .NET MAUI on actual devices or as a website, but we don't really have a web target with .NET MAUI. So the way I would see it, because you still, in my mind, desktop and web and mobile are still too different for it to just have one layer on top of it and rule it all. So in my mind, it works best if you have those Razor components, make those where it makes sense, and share those between like the different scenarios that you have, so that you reuse that code. But you could still have kind of like your nuances, your difference between the different platforms that you're running on. Again, personally, I don't think that we will very soon see a world where it will be the exact same code base, at least for like web and desktop and mobile. But that's just my opinion. So that's kind of like the options that you have right now.
Thanks, Gerald. Yeah.
Yeah. Thomas, if you have any questions, you can unmute and can ask, or maybe yeah, if not, then maybe finish today. I think that's for today. Thanks, Kiral. Thank you very much for
Thank you for having
your
me.
session. I'm really happy and to host your session. And maybe in future we'll try to organize an in-person session and invite you.
That would be amazing. I've never been there, so that would be really cool.
Yeah, sure. Thanks everyone for joining today. So have a good weekend, and in next session we'll organize soon, and you can join our Global Azure Bootcamp on 7th May. So maybe our next session will be after that. So thanks again for joining today, and thank you, Garrett, again for
Thank you.
presenting. Thank you.
Bye bye.